Good evening. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Jefferson County Board of Education on Monday, September 24th. And do we have somebody to lead us with the pledge?
Good evening.
Excellent.
We have three fifth grade students from Blue Ridge Elementary. These three students actually did this when they were in kindergarten, so we thought it would be fitting that this is their last year with us to have them tonight. We have Mickey Reagan, Lauren Spitzer, and Miss Malia Kaiser. If they'll please come up and help me lead the pledge of allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much.
Amazing how often great teachers get great kids.
All right, and then recognitions. We have some recognitions this evening.
Yes. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for allowing us to showcase some of the amazing things happening so far this year at Jefferson County Schools. Some of the folks that we're recognizing this evening you've probably seen on television or in the newspaper because they've started to really pay attention to some of the outstanding students, volunteers, and staff that we have. So we're going to start off with board recognitions, and most of them brought a lot of people with them. So someone's going to come up now and talk about Michael Lesner for representing the state of West Virginia and Jefferson County Schools and Washington High School in the 2018 Microsoft Office Specialist U.S. National Championships in Atlanta, Georgia. Want to come up and say a few words?
Tonight, we're so happy that we have two of our CTE teachers with us this evening, and they work so closely with testing our kids and getting them ready for the workforce. And this is Summer Russell and Jackie Gore.
Hi. I wanted to let you know that Michael's one of our most outstanding business students in our department. In our school since 2014, when Microsoft Office testing began to be free, we've had 154 students certified in Microsoft Word. And the reason I point out the Microsoft Word certification is because Michael was one of our top West Virginia students. He scored first place in the whole state last year in Word, and that enabled him to get to go on to nationals in the summer. And what place did you get at nationals? Seventh in the whole nation. We're so proud of Michael. So in Microsoft Word in our school, in the top three, the state recognizes the top three each semester, and we choose to certify students in Word during the first semester, and then we have other programs the second semester. But in Word in our school, in the top three, we've had 7 students altogether test in the top 3, and only a few have earned that first place in the state and gotten to go on to nationals. So we're very, very proud of Michael. I think he has a few words he wants to say to the board as well.
I'd like to thank the board for making this trip possible, and all my teachers from middle school to my 12th grade year for making it possible for me to get to Atlanta and compete on the national stage.
Michael, go do that.
Michael, can you tell them who your teacher was for Word? Because it wasn't one of us.
Miss Moreland.
Mrs. Moreland.
We should have invited Susie.
Oh, I did invite her, but she's busy with her grandbaby.
Busy grandma.
Yes.
All right, everyone say Microsoft.
Microsoft.
One more. All right, good deal. Thank you.
Great job.
Up next, we have a real high flyer, Michael Enriquez. He is a member of the Jefferson County, or the Jefferson High School Cougars Air Force Junior ROTC program.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure for me tonight to reintroduce this young man to you. He's been here before. Michael is currently our Cadet Corps commander. He commands all 250 of the cadets in our program, which, by the way, is the largest junior ROTC program in the state of West Virginia. He is an outstanding young man. He is academically accomplished. We hope very soon that he's going to join our 5 current graduates who are in service academies. He is, well, the bad guys might win one. He wants to go Navy, but we're going to make him apply to all 3. But the real reason Michael is here tonight is this past year, the Air Force identified that they want to involve young people in an interest in flying. And so the Air Force Chief of Staff put together a task force, literally, and they selected 120 cadets from across the United States of America from a starting eligible pool of nearly 100,000 cadets. There were nearly 900 cadets who applied for this program, and 120 were ultimately selected. Michael was one of those young people who spent his entire summer flying down at Liberty University and working to earn his private pilot's license. And we could not be more proud of him for this. He's learned to do something they never trusted me to do, which is fly an airplane. So, Michael, you want to share a little bit about your experience?
The Flight Academy was a life-changing experience, and I highly encourage any cadet to attend if they're probable. And if you have a student that's entering high school, I encourage them to enroll in Air Force Junior ROTC. It's a great program. It's a great way to get involved in the community. It certainly has benefits. So if you guys have any questions, you can always feel free to reach me out. I'm sure Major Sudam could give you some of my contact information. And I'd like to thank Major Sudam for helping me get to the point where I am and helping me with my service academies. And I look forward to having a great year with Major Sudam.
Go Navy on 3.
Killing me, Hans.
The Navy has planes too. You're all good.
All right. Up next is Chloe Fisher. She has made an outstanding contribution to her school at South Jefferson Elementary.
Hello, I am Carrie Mahoney, principal at South Jefferson Elementary, and it is a pleasure for me to introduce to you Chloe Fisher. To give you a little background about why we are here this evening, Chloe approached me and Mr. Jenkins last year and requested a meeting. And while we were sitting in that meeting, she started talking to us about an idea called buddy benches. And not only did she talk about it, but she came prepared with a written formal proposal to present to us about what they were all about, why she thought we needed them. And as she was talking to us, I was impressed with a couple of things about Chloe. The first thing was oftentimes people come with a problem, and rarely do people do what Chloe did, which is she came with a problem, but then she came with a solution. And I was very impressed with that. I was also impressed with her level of empathy for other students in our school and recognizing that they needed a place to meet new friends. Before I turn it over to her, I do want to recognize her parents who are here. It's Donnie and Kara Fisher, and they have been very supportive of our school over the years. This is actually our 3rd Fisher student to come through South Jefferson, and I know that they're very proud of her as we are. But I also want to share how proud I am of them as parents, because they are instilling values in Chloe that will take her to the next level of her life and carry her through her lifetime. So without further ado, I'm going to present to you Miss Chloe Fisher.
So one day I was in a 4-H meeting, and a friend of mine had mentioned the buddy benches when we were listing community service ideas. and I had thought that would be a really good idea for my school. So I was thinking for a couple days now, and then I thought that it's just a really good idea that I should ask the principal. So I went to my teacher and I said, can I go to the Mr. Jenkins and Miss Mahoney and talk to them about a good idea for the school? And she said yes, and she said you might want to write a note to them first and just take it down to them, so I did. And so I went down there and I talked to them, and with the help of Mr. Jenkins and Miss Mahoney, now this year we had the buddy benches.
You can learn more on WDVM TV. Her story is featured today. I like that you asked to go to the principal's office. That's
Right?
All right, buddy benches on 3. 1, 2, 3. All right, well done. Thank you. All right, up next, it's that time of year we have 2 semifinalists for the 2019 or the 64th Annual National Merit Scholarship here in Jefferson County. Thought they deserved some recognition. First up, Nicholas Kowalski from Washington High School.
He's here. Sorry.
All right.
Thanks. Hey, how are you? Good evening. Good evening. This is Soren, and we are so happy to have him at Washington High School. He excels in everything he touches. His future plans are going to be software design, and he has already gotten a start. He's already designed a game. He also gives back to his community by teaching computer science at the Charlestown Library, which we're very proud of that. He has 4 AP classes. He likes his AP computer science the best, which should come as no surprise. He's also in our band, and he takes physics. He's a section leader in the drums. So if you get to a football game, you'll be able to see him out there performing on Friday nights for the home games. He is one of the semifinalists, and we're hoping that he will become a finalist. Over 90% do, and when they become finalists, they are eligible for scholarships, and that's what we're hopeful for Soren. Soren, thank you very much. And there you go, my love. Congratulations. And you go stand right around behind Miss Skinner. Thank you.
All right, free ride on 3. 1, 2, 3. All right, one more. Terrific. Thank you. Okay, I mentioned that we had 2 semifinalists here in Jefferson County for the 64th Annual National Merit Scholarship. Our other is from Jefferson High School, and that's Daisy Levine. Well, I'm not sure if she made it. Double check. I'll double check while you take the podium. Nope, she didn't make it.
Sorry, Daisy's been here several times before. She was Governor's Honors Academy just this summer. She was here for that. She was a regional math field day representative, and was also a girls all-league soccer team. So she's a frequent flyer here. She missed the night, but she's been here quite frequently before.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, too, Daisy's the only student who has actually done all 4 Governor School Academies from 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, including the entrepreneurship one. So, yeah.
She could have her own
great
seat
student.
here, couldn't
She might be running this place someday, you never know.
We'll get this to her so she can throw it on the stack.
That's right.
All right. That's actually the wrapping up our board recognitions, but we have 2 more distinctions that we're going to bestow. The first is the Volunteer of the Month. And if you talk to any teacher, any principal, they will tell you how vital the volunteer role is to the success of a school. And we have a really special story from Carmen Bermudez, who is this year's Volunteer of the Month. This is for you. You have any words, you want to come talk a little bit about?
And I wrote some things down so I wouldn't forget. One of the things that came to mind when Carmen approached me is that empathy, by definition, is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. And then I thought about what is a volunteer, and it is a person who freely offers to take part in an enterprise or undertake a task. So Carmen came to us last year as a parent and has become a vital part of the Paige Jackson family and community. Not only is she on our PTVO board, but this year came to me when she heard of a student who was unable to communicate to us in English. She was very concerned about this child, and she asked if she could help, and I was like, absolutely, yay. So she came into the classroom to a child who was very nervous, very scared. The teacher was trying, and I was trying. It's been a while since I've been speaking Spanish in my little bit of Spanish, and what's so cute is this little girl giggles because, you know, I'm talking textbook Spanish, and they're talking conversational Spanish. And we weren't able to break through, and she was very sad at Paige. And if you know my motto at Paige, Paige has got to be as great as Disney World. When you walk in, it's going to be the greatest place on earth. What Carmen realized is she was scared. And not only was she scared, she had several needs that were not being met. She was not getting her food needs met. She was not getting some of her academic needs met. So Carmen magically comes and appears with food for the family, creates a resource for her mother, the child's mother in the community, and reaches out to them. And our student is being very successful, and she comes in every day and reads with her and speaks with her, and her frown has turned upside down. She's so excited to be at Paige. Carmen even said there was a classroom that had other Spanish-speaking students in it. She said, why don't we put her with some people that she can communicate with and make friends with? So the best I can say, Carmen, is that angels do walk among us. So thank you so much for what you've done for the student.
Pull it around for the picture.
Thank you.
All right, 1, 2, 3. All right, great. Thank you for making a difference.
Yes.
You're stuck now, by the way. And last but not least, we give out our 2 Spirit of Jefferson Awards, presented to both a professional and a service staff member who have made an incalculable difference in the overall atmosphere of Jefferson County Schools. Our first one is presented to service staff member Sharon Stewart from Wildwood Middle School. We'll get that to her.
She's at Wildwood.
And on the professional side, we have Beth Saunders from T.A. Lowry Elementary School. And the hallway's empty. So, regardless, these folks make a big difference, and we appreciate their efforts. So that concludes our presentations this evening. Thank you all for your attention. And thanks everyone who did participate for everything they did.
Thank you. Superintendent's comments. None? Do we have a motion for the approval of minutes from the September 10th meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Citizens' comments. First up is Lori's Berry. And just as a reminder, we have 3 minutes to speak. If Ms. Ogden would keep us on track, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Good evening. There's an issue that has arisen, and my question to the board is, what action will the Board of Education take on the issues of long-term, non-licensed substitutes teaching high school core subjects for our 2018-19 school year. The issue is raised because our kids are getting substitutes for 10 months that are not licensed for core subjects that build on top of another subject. And my fear for my son, that he will not be successful in the Spanish 1 and this Math 10 class. So my question is, what can you do, or what will you do, to ensure that we have licensed teachers in our high school? And these are the two children from Washington High School, and this is her mother, who is supporting me. And we want to know why, because Jeffrey doesn't have a teacher right now at Spanish 1. He hasn't had a teacher since the beginning of the year. She was long-term. She's got dismissed. Now he's had he's only had literally two instructional days in Spanish. And it's with the Spanish 2 and 3 teacher at Washington High School. So I'm concerned the last grade that was put into live grades was September 9th. Interns are already out. And the kids weren't very successful in a class of 27. So yes, I am worried because this is his first year taking a foreign class. So I'm extremely concerned. I believe my 3 minutes is up.
Thank you. And next up, we have Jeffrey Berry.
Hi. West Virginia is in its 7th year decline in a 4-year college enrollment. So the question is, why was West Virginia Achievement Project discontinued, and what will replace it for our schools? That's my question.
Unfortunately, we can't answer questions. We're not allowed to, it's public comment, so you're allowed to speak to us, but it's not on the agenda, so we're not able to respond to you at this point in time.
Okay.
We can definitely get some answers and get back with you, but we can't answer the question this evening.
Okay, thank you.
But thank you for asking the question. Next, we have the consent agenda.
Changes to the consent agenda are number 22, a change of location. That was just a clerical error that it was put in as Shepherdstown Elementary School. It's actually Shepherdstown Middle School. And a request to remove items number 25 and 26. We were asked to provide some additional information about those prior to approval, and we will provide that before reintroducing those to the board.
All right. So do we have a motion on the amended consent agenda? Second?
Second.
Any discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Unfinished business. Approval to place on review Jefferson County Schools prescription and over-the-counter medication policy.
This is the same policy as last time. We just needed to extend the time. It didn't get up as quickly as we'd liked it to. And with that timing not being appropriate, we want to do what's right and keep it up for another 2 weeks.
So you just want to
Yeah, just going to extend the time.
extend it for another 2 weeks?
Yep.
All right. I guess we can do a motion to extend it, since it was supposed to be 2 weeks. Second.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
New business. fiscal year 18 unaudited financial statement presentation. His 3 minutes is up.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam President, Madam Superintendent, board members. I'm Beth Marone, I'm the Chief Financial Officer, and I am here this evening to, that's the wrong presentation. Talk about not our proposed school budget that we approved in May, but, hang on. I apologize for just a minute.
No problem.
It'll take a second.
It just gives us an extra moment to,
Go ahead and
prepare
review,
for
yeah.
the anticipation of a financial presentation.
Good. Thank you, Vincent.
I love how everybody needs a guy like that, where you're like struggling.
I'm like, best.
Let me fix that for you.
Hey, he gave me the cue before the meeting. Oh, here it is, right here. Try that one. I think I just pulled up the wrong one. He was like, all you have to do is look in that camera and I'll come. Okay, that's good. Thank you. Sorry about that. Anyway, I am here tonight to give an overview of our financial position for fiscal year 18. This is actually, should say 17-18. Apologize for that error. The board received the presentation in the packet, and today I also provided 2 additional packets. The smaller packet is the requirement of what we need to publish in the newspaper related to our fiscal year 18 audit. And the larger packet is our complete unaudited financial statements. Related to fiscal year 18, we have a GASB, Governmental Accounting Standard Board 75 implementation. And for those of us that were on the board in fiscal year 15, we had a GASB 68. GASB 68 was related to our net pension liability for the unfunded retirement and implemented the school system's proportional share of that benefit. GASB 75, 5 years later, is implemented for other post-employment benefits. For me to summarize that, I think if we remember in 2012, we had a lawsuit related to those other post-employment benefits and that they should reside on the county's financial statements. And as we get to the 4th or 5th page, we'll see the OPEB. Every year we have the presentation and we back at that OPEB liability so that the board can understand what their final fund balance is. Basically, GASB 75 removes it from your fund statements and allows it to be on your district-wide. That's the technical piece of it. With that said, we're going to review how we finished up in comparison to our budget and our actuals, both on the revenue side and the expenditure side. This slide is a little different from what was in your packet. The miscellaneous and the state aid were netted together, and yours will say those netted together. I separated those. First of all, taxes came in at $336,000, or about 1% over what we budgeted. For the board members who have been with us for the last 4 or 5 years, and for the new ones, we've been tracking our tax collections and related to our uncollectible taxes and trying to get that at a decent number, and I would say that this number is a decent number. And I think we left our allowance at 5.5% to obtain that. You could see that our collections came in just a little over 100%. State aid, miscellaneous, exceeded our expectations by $300,000, primarily from, get nervous when you're standing up here. The majority of that interest on our bank accounts. So that's the budgeted interest compared to what the interest came in, which is about threefold. I think even in our own personal accounts, interest rates have been on an increase, and probably in 20's budget, you'll see a significant. I did increase it for our 19 budget from 80,000 to 91. We actually collected close to 200,000. Two factors that are factoring into that: the interest rate increases, and we have a small amount of money with BCT that's on a sweep account now, and we're seeing considerable interest from that.
And Ms. Marone, if you could talk for just a second, I will say it was an innovation of our financial department, which took some conversation with the schools to have a discussion about sweep accounts, where basically we're pooling the money that previously sat in all of these separate in a very simple way.
Right.
I'm sure Ms. Marone will give you a much more complicated version of it, but
No,
pull
but
those
that's
in and
it.
then generate the additional interest income from that, and to convince the schools, we're continue to track it, it's still your money. We're just using the aggregate power of this to gain greater interest, to be able to have more to give back to you. And it is a lot of the thoughtful little things that you have to do well over time, not huge things that usually end up making the big difference. So thank you to your department for that.
And I will say, very proud of our financial secretaries, because when you sweep money, what happens on your bank statement is you see this money go out. And so that initiated a lot of phone calls to say, that's my money, where is it? And it sweeps back in on the first of the next month, or on your next bank statement. You see it sweep in with the amount of interest that it drew for wherever they swept it to obtain that higher rate. And it's a win-win for the local bank and for our school system. Anyway, that is the difference for our miscellaneous, or the primary difference for our miscellaneous income. The decrease in the 249,000 is increased enrollment. So when we have state aid, we do budget all of the state aid that flows in, and when we project, which our projection was actually 250,000, it's net with some retirement money that was in that same account, but we did not grow last year. So, I know that we're looking at a lot of data and trying to understand the growth in our school system. From my perspective, that was every third year that we either maintained or barely grew. 2012, 2015, and 2018. This year we're watching it. I'm hoping that we will grow, and it's just a 3-year pattern, unexplained, versus anything else. Lastly is our big number, is our Medicaid number. 1.5 million is a significant number, and for those on the board for a while, and our newer board members, we've been tracking this change for a number of years. And I put a little footnote down at the bottom to let you know that these are the annual Medicaid amounts that we're receiving. During the fiscal year, we are receiving a small amount, between 170 to 250,000. The new state-approved plan requires an annual reconciliation where there are criteria that you input, and it's a very complicated process to understand what your actual amount is. We do now have 3 years or 2 years of data that we've received. For this fiscal year, which ended fiscal year 18, I did also book an estimate of half of the 2 previous years. I expect it to be higher than that, but it's a conservative estimate, and we are still making changes to Medicaid. So $1.5 million of the revenue exceeding our budget is due to the Medicaid annual report coming in. Any questions on revenue?
Miscellaneous,
Mhm.
it went up, what you thought we would get, like what types of things would that be?
So in that miscellaneous account, there are things such as our fuel reimbursement, our P-card rebate, which actually I'm pretty proud of too. We're up to $160,000 just for using the credit card in our system. Our new farm lease, that would fall into miscellaneous. Actually, the retiree dental and vision program was up 30,000. And that's also falling in the miscellaneous. I think some of that is just current collections, and now that we have an automated way for collecting that it is going to smooth out those collections within the fiscal year that they belong, instead of maybe having some timing differences. E-rate. So E-rate is what we receive from our telecommunications and internet services. There's a percentage of that we receive. That would fall into miscellaneous also.
What about board designated income?
That is not in Fund 11. We're focusing on our general fund. There is a page in the back of this presentation. And so at the end of a fiscal year, we look at where we finish up, and this year we'll finish up $5.5 million or $5.6 million. And in the second board meeting in October, we'll designate funds that we either ask for certain projects, and the remainder of that typically transfers into the board designated, which is Fund 51, and resides not within the general fund.
I'm not understanding. So you said this is revenue. I'm asking, where does this revenue come from?
The board designated revenue?
Yes.
So when we finish this fiscal year, the end of this fiscal year, we look at how much revenue we had above our actuals, and we look at the expenses. And we add those numbers together, and then whatever we finish up with is $5.6 million. Of that $5.6 million, we obligate what our commitments are, and in this particular situation, we will have $4.8 million that's left over. Board designated has a balance that is already residing in there. At the end of this fiscal year, we will determine what to do with that $4.8 million. Typically, or in the past, it has been transferred into board designated and sat in there. Once it's in board designated, it cannot be used unless the board allows the designation to occur.
So is it carryover?
Carryover can contribute, that's the only, carryover can contribute to it.
What have we seen that is a difference in our table referendum this year?
It's coming up. It'll show you what our collections and our drawdowns were. There are less, or I think it's 1.9 million, and we're putting out 2.2. It's one of the things we have on our slate to address, at least incrementally, in the 2020 budget cycle, meaning that instead of 1.9 million being the transfer to the general fund, we'll probably reduce it to 1.8 in 2020, 1.7, and then 1.6, so that our actual collections equal our actual expenditures from table referendum funds. So it's down from about 4.8 when they originally started. It's significantly down. The good news is we don't make commitments with it. This is our first time that it's exceeded, and the reason our expenditures are exceeding our revenues is because of the continuous decline in the revenue source. General fund expenditures. As a recap, we've been working diligently to bring our actuals to our budget. So when you look at salaries, and knowing the data that we're looking at, we are within 1% of what we originally budgeted and compared to our actuals. So on the salary and benefit side, I think that that's a good number. I think ideally to use the resources in the best manner that we can, we want it to be under 1. So our goal would be for our salaries and benefits, budget to actual, to always be under 1%. I think the stronger that our HR department gets and the tracking that we have, I think it's an achievable goal, and we'll probably see it over our next 3 years. Non-salary is a little bit more difficult, a little more analysis when I looked at this number, because 13.5 seemed extremely high. But we've made a couple changes over the past couple years. One of those are that we have a reserve to allow us to allocate funds to unforeseen projects or situations that occur during a normal school year. And you can see that the contingency also, this was a year that we reserved $950,000 in our contingency to accommodate like multiple state cuts, and then we didn't have it. So if you pull out that 1.4 million, you're looking at reducing that 13.5 to about 6.8, or half of it. It's about half of it. And then we had some transfers, and as I go through the expense numbers, you can see we had some transfers that Step 7 picked up the cost from the general fund at year end, which was about $250,000. When you pull that number out, your non-salary budget to actuals are at about 5.8%. Is that good? That's good. Should it be better? I think that's what our leadership team is talking about, and where, because we're at the point where we've pushed and now we're in an uncomfortable zone. And so we have to determine where's our comfort level. Is 5.8 really where our comfort level is, and is that the balance of the stress that we don't need to push it any further? And I think some of that comes with the more data that we look at and the more data that we analyze and review after the fact, which we are, will help with that. And for example, the substitute cost up 6.5% or 6.7%. That's your budget to your actuals. Your actuals to your actuals, because Dr. Gibson, we're going to talk about it tomorrow because she's been bugging me since she saw that number. Our actual substitute cost between 17 and 18 did decrease. We had 9 days off for professionals, and there was a considerable savings in the professional line items for substitutes. To say that it was the 9 days, I think it factored in other substitute costs and
having it was the first year of our new schedule, we had staff development days where we didn't have to pay folks to be off.
Actually, that's true too, and also the year end. I mean, at the year end, we have a lot of times we have long-term subs that we didn't have to pay, so there were some other factors that factored into that. On the non-salary, we had $385,000 under professional services. Primarily, let me look at this. I had to make notes. There was so much data. Primarily, that is a shift from contracted special ed to hiring of special ed employees, or at least 50% of that 385. In the 400 other or property services, 224. That line item was mainly in maintenance and for contractors that we hire to do different different things. 451, Ralph, I'm not exactly sure what we're hiring. Though maintenance spent it, they didn't actually spend it in that area, which tells me at a high level that we're doing more of that stuff in-house. That's the kind of data that we're looking at JLT after the fact to say, are there trends here? Are there things that we need to look at? Is this a true trend? Do we need to change where we're actually budgeting those line items? 500 objects, other services, Head Start collaborations in there. The two main items in there, and this one might be shocking, and I'm glad it's kind of being recorded because Cindy will like this, $350,000 decrease in special education services outside of our system. So that would be Aurora, Brookline, the other places that we've moved students. That would tell me that between what we did in 17 and what we did in 18 has decreased considerably. In addition, there was $121,000 that transferred to Step 7 to cover the James Rumsey tuition. 600 objects, which also, this line item's 260,000 is actually a little lower. Our electric for the first time in a while was 166,000, over what we had budgeted. And there was another line item, our diesel, I think, was 36 or 60,000 over. But the remainder of the variance in this line item is primarily from the transfers from the general fund to step 7 to accommodate licenses and things of that nature. Also, we had anticipated when we shifted the buying of the paper to the central office level, about $100,000. It's actually coming in closer to $60,000 for expenses. The other ones are, kind of small and little. I mean, other, I think, is primarily the taxes we're paying on the properties that we bought. And other than that, that summarizes our expenditures in total being less than what we budgeted at 3.7 million. So we have 1.9 million coming in good on the revenue side and 3.7 coming in good on the expenditure side. Any questions on the expenses?
For the transfers, is it possible to, have that broken into, if it's C&I or if it's, I don't really understand what just transfers mean.
So the
I understand that you transfer it from the general fund to someplace else, but for the purpose of it.
Mm-hmm. So 2 million of that is the transfer that went to board designated and actually ties right into your earlier question. How does that money get there? So 2 million of that was the carryover from the previous year that went into your, I think it was 2.1 million, into your board designated. I actually have. Well, I tell you what, we do have an actual breakdown of what those transfers were. Without saying it off the top of my head, how about if I just email it to you, what the other transfers out were?
I can send it out to the board.
Yeah, that's fine, I can send it to you. Any other questions?
Yes, so the contingency, you thought you was gonna need 1.4 million and ended up using none?
We typically don't use our contingency, because we would use any other resource prior to that. However, we budgeted 950,000 because the 2 or 3 fiscal years prior to that, the state did a mid-year cut. The first one we weren't as prepared for. The second 2 we prepared somewhat for. And in this particular budget, they didn't actually do the cut. So 950 of that is for that. The JLT reserve, it was, I think, $1 million. So we did use 600,000 to supplement different areas of the budget, and there was 400 remaining, which will be typical on an annual basis, I would think.
Wait a minute. So you did use some of the contingency, the reserve. And it says you budgeted 1.4, actual use 0. So where is, I guess I'm not seeing it. Is that in transfers?
The JLT reserve, let me look at that for a second. Okay. So, this is your final budget, not your adopted budget. So in order to see that difference, we would have to put the adopted budget up.
So there was
Yes,
more, there
yes.
was more in it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Any other questions? Okay, fund balance. We spoke about this earlier. You can see that in fiscal year 18, there is no OPEB transfer out. That the ending fund balance, the 5.642, is how our governmental-wide fund balance is going to finish up for fiscal year 18. If you look at the year above, you can see that the 4.68 was backed out, and now GASB 75 actually doesn't require us to put it on our fund balance anymore. And it's just a graph depicting our fund balance and where it has gone over the past 8 years. And you can see that the past 4 years, we've gone on a steady increase of building up our fund equity. And this, what do we do with our fund balance? Well, we first of all meet our obligations that are current, which our fiscal year 19 budget allocated $500,000 in order to fill our revenue gap. Non-spendables are prepaids, primarily BRIM insurance. Those would be expenses that weren't due until July 1st, and we book them as prepaid, and they call them non-spendable in the financial statements now. Encumbrances, you can see that that number used to be a significant number. The requirement now is that if you want to leave a purchase order open for a previous or for a next fiscal year, that you need to have the invoice, because by financial standards you have to provide the service in the fiscal year that you book it. And then there were some restricted Fund 11 projects. We had the HR compensation study and I think a central office automation project that are restricted in Fund 11. We back those out, which leaves a carryover or unassigned fund balance of $4.8 million. And on the second board meeting in October, we come and ask the board to designate those funds or request any other needs that we have in our system at the time. We look at our actuals and how that compared to what we budgeted in 19 to see if we need any supplements. And then typically, whatever is not requested at the school level, the board, we recommend that it transfer into the board designated fund and be reside there so that it cannot be released without board approval.
What makes something a restricted fund?
When the board designated the money for the HR compensation study, they restricted it to only be used for the HR compensation study. If it's in Fund 61, by the nature of that fund, it's in 51. Within another example of Fund 11 that would be restricted is, Ralph, what's your money that you get?
408.
So, yeah, Senate Bill 408 money, which is restricted to capital expenditures within the system. It resides in Fund 11. There aren't many restricted projects in Fund 11. There are very few. Revenue gap, just a history of where we've been and how we're tracking our revenues with the goal of having our recurring revenue and our recurring expenses equal without having to support that gap with any other means except those recurring revenues. And it took a little jump in 19 primarily due to the pay raise. And most of that to the cost to the county for that pay raise. So the state funded most of it, but I think between $700,000 and $800,000 had to be locally funded because we are over the formula and our excess levy provides for those additional contracted days in some cases.
I think it's important to point out too for the public to continue to help educate them that way, because I know I did not understand that piece, but as the state provides for that, when you say we're over the formula, they do not see positions such as having a nurse at every school if there was some kind of a diabetic issue or EpiPen issue or whatnot. They don't see the need to have a chief financial officer to take care and track our our money.
They don't fund it.
They do not fund it. They don't see a need for, music and art. There are lots of things that we are supposedly supposed to do without, and obviously, we as a school system do not feel that that is legitimate education, and understanding the needs of having my own family that lives in some of those areas in West Virginia that they do not have resources.
Oh,
But
they don't fund any professionals greater than a 200-day contract. They don't see a need. They don't see a need for it. They don't understand that Jefferson County probably runs the best summer program in the entire state. Probably excess levy may be relevant in other counties. I would say complementary to the education system levy for us is probably more accurate. Or it's definitely not excess. It has a
needs,
negative
yeah.
connotation. It's more of a need for the services that we provide here.
One of the points of contention from superintendents to the state is that both the reimbursement rate for nurses and for school counselors has been in a separate formula, which they froze in 2008.
That's
And
correct.
so with the explosion of kids with allergies, special medical conditions, mental health needs, and all of the staff, all of that has been funded locally because the state has not changed its formula to keep up with that expense. And as she stated, we would have no custodians during the summer, we would have no summer program, all of that has to be funded locally, so it's a fairly significant level of expense.
Additional revenue sources. This is something I add to the end of the presentation, just so you have the amounts in the forefront. The board designated is a fund that was established many years ago primarily to assist us with non-funded construction needs because we were building a lot of schools. And as you may or may not know, there's a lot of things that the SBA will not fund when you're putting a new school in. It actually ended up being a nice savings account in some ways, and a nice designation for us to, when our assessed values took a very hard hit in Jefferson County, it actually helped us fill a gap, a very needed gap. And you can see at the end of fiscal year 18 that we'll finish up with 2.4 million. Now we will have a drawdown for the 19 budget, and then we will have a supplement in October, most likely from the 4.8 that will replenish some of that board designation, and it's getting fairly healthy. The second line item is from the sale of our annex property. That was designated after the sale to also be, and I've separated it just so that the board can see what's in there and what's coming out of there. There was one approval to come out of there, and that, I can't remember what it was off the top of my head.
That was leveled reader book rooms for
Okay.
balance literacy.
Okay. And that's the only expenditure, other than there might have been some very small attorney fees in order to make that happen, I think also was in there. So your balance is 2.3 million. Table referendum, Mrs. Ogden, to your question, you can see that we collected 1.9 million, and that we draw down almost 2.2 million. We did not address that in our 19 budget. We actually increased our Medicaid comfortably and filled the lease revenue gap in the 19 budget, which is why we did not address table referendum. And you can see that we have a balance, and we can get through 2 or 3 more years before it actually becomes an issue because of the balance that we've been carrying over. Impact fees don't reside in our school system in our bank account. We draw those down when we have specific projects. They're in the financial notes. I don't know how many people really look at it, but from a board and community standpoint, it's nice to know what balance we started with, what we've collected. Even if it's half of what we used to collect, we still are collecting 1.5 million. Our drawdowns, those are our land purchases, with a remaining balance of 2.2 million, with nothing that I'm aware of that we're committing to at this point. One of the things I added to this slide is our 408 money. think if you look on the earlier slide, there's a little note at the bottom that says it excludes Senate Bill 408 money. Having that within the number skews it significantly. I think 2 years ago we had $800,000 and it then dropped back down to 200. So it's excluded from the comparison so that it is a truer comparison to see what our operating is. But I wanted you to see that those numbers are there. They're assigned typically to maintenance projects, just pulled out so that 1 year you don't see 800,000 and the next year 200,000 and not have a better comparison without the skewed data of the Senate Bill 408.
So how do we get certain amounts? Is it a formula?
It
It's
is.
based on something?
New growth. There's a specific formula in the tax, you know,
It's the
how.
overall growth of the county as a whole.
Okay.
So the larger the county gets, the more the county as a whole is worth, the more we get, and we get the difference between last year and this year. That 800,000 was just because they put in a whole bunch of
Infrastructure.
utility infrastructures, and the utility infrastructures raise the overall value of the county.
So it comes in on the assessed values. They actually have a new growth column that they do a calculation on how much is specific to our county.
And correct me if I'm wrong, that is the one thing, if I remember right, that they flirt with
Yes,
axing.
always.
Because it really only is for maybe the last 5 remaining growth counties in the state of West
That's
Virginia out of
correct.
55.
That's
So
correct.
it's kind of our opportunity where they fund nothing, if you will, or if they fund minimal pieces in those other areas that maybe don't affect some of the smaller counties that don't have those needs. Where we have those needs, we have to fund them. We need as many of these extra resources as we can get.
I would agree. From my knowledge, the formulas are very much geared to smaller counties and counties losing population. There are all kind of things inserted into our formula, our school formula, to when you lose population, you can't go below this number. You know, this and increased enrollment, which only happened maybe 7, 8 years ago, has not always been around, are one of the 2 things that you're currently funded on for the good. Now, PEIA, they can't do any other reconciliation unless they look 2 years back. PEIA, they are reconciling that and giving us an adjustment annually in March to decrease our state revenue if the rolls or PEIA people rolls, or you know, everybody who we have enrolled in that doesn't meet what it's supposed to meet, which I find it's about $4 million that they take back. You know, some counties get, some get taken back, but overall they sweep that money back into the state pot.
And when we go to the school building authority at the state to build facilities, we traditionally use those table referendum monies and the impact fee monies as far as that's what we have to put up for them to match.
We've used the table referendum in the past. It's not available for use now, but you're right, your impact fees would be a local match or a local source for, my understanding is being more favorably looked on and getting an award for having something brought back to us.
What do you mean it's not available now? Oh, because of the land
We don't
purchase?
have any.
Oh,
I mean, because we
It's
are,
committed.
yeah, we're collecting 1.9 million, but we're spending 2.2 million because 1.9 of that is transferring to our general fund to help meet our capital expenditure obligations. We probably over the next 3 years need to reduce that to 1.6. And the other 300,000 is paying for the renovations on our transportation training room facility that we purchased.
Are there limitations on spending the 408 money?
Yes. Capital improvements. You know, you can't pay people salaries. It has to be for growth related. So they call it Senate Bill 408 growth. So it needs to be related to growth within growing counties. And as a matter of fact, if you don't grow, if you don't have any new houses built, you won't be getting those those funds. That concludes how we finished up in fiscal year 18. Are there any questions? Back in second board meeting in October to designate those funds.
Thank you very much.
You're
Ms. Ryan.
welcome.
Thank you.
Any other comments on that before we move on? All right. Do we have any executive session this evening?
Okay, I have a couple things. We had an epic meeting, but nothing of great concern came out of that. I'd like to have a report from HR on the days that are uncovered by subs, and have it broke down to professionals and service, because it seems like we're getting a lot of those. And we need to try to take a look at the incentive for not using days and see how that equates to what we're not covering for subs financially, whether that would be helpful to bring that back. It seems like we're getting a lot of uncovered days.
We have fewer substitutes. And as you stated, there was previously an incentive for individuals to save those days of leave because they could apply them towards their retirement, and that's no longer the case, so.
We need to see how that might bounce
Yes,
out.
sir.
Because somehow we got to get qualified people in the classrooms.
Talk about it. Can I talk about it in executive session? Does it involve a student?
Okay, can we go into executive session to discuss a safety student issue with a specific student?
Presumably, didn't have it on the agenda, but if
I know.
that's.
So,
Yeah.
I don't want to identify anyone.
okay, right, no, we can't identify a
Right.
student in open session. So, okay, so do we have a?
Student safety issue, is that what you said?
Correct. So do we have a motion to go into executive session?
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you very much.